most touching question is, why did the war start?
Welcome to Landlords and Tenants, What to Know and How to Win, with your host, attorney Niv Davidovich. In the Landlords and Tenants podcast, you'll learn from property owners as they share their experiences, aimed to help shape and educate people's practices. What has worked, what has not worked. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, davidovichtlaw.com. Now here's the host of Landlords and Tenants, Niv Davidovich.
Hey everybody, this is Niv Davidovich. Welcome to our new podcast called Landlords and Tenants, What to Know, How to Win. I'm hoping to provide our audience with helpful tips, insightful war stories, updates on the law, and also unique perspectives on the real estate industry, landlord-tenant relationships, and I hope some entertaining tales which should assuage you that whatever your landlord-tenant nightmare might be, trust me, somebody has it worse. So what makes me so interested in landlord-tenant relations? I'll tell you just as an intro to what I do. I'm the managing partner of Davidovich Stein Law Group, a full-service real estate, landlord-tenant, and construction firm headquartered in North Hollywood, California, and serving the entire California market. We pretty much exclusively represent landlords, developers, owners, and property managers with regard to their litigation, transactional, and eviction needs. Now, a huge part of our practice is dealing with various landlord-tenant issues, both residential and commercial, and not just evictions or UDs, as we call them, but also other types of disputes ranging from habitability to mold, bed bugs, vermin, intertenant disputes, nuisances, discrimination claims, retaliation, and all variety of other challenging issues. Now, the landscape of landlord-tenant law has become a minefield for our clients. Every month, it seems, some locality or the state itself passes a new law whose primary purpose is simply to put stumbling blocks in front of landlords, developers, and property managers, simply trying to go about the simple business of building and providing much-needed housing services. Now, despite the fact that most people live in a house or apartment that some developer or landlord built at his risk and usually with at least some of his own money, public perception of this very diverse group of business people is unfairly and illegitimately skewed to the point where some people believe that the whole concept of having to rent a space to live in is somehow inherently evil or immoral, and that everyone's housing should be provided like the air, free of charge. This is plain wrong. It is this belief and the army of adherents to it which are evil, and whose ideas, played out, always result in shared misery, poverty, and the erosion of society. I believe these ideas to my core, and that's why I do what I do. I think landlords and developers provide a crucial service, and they deserve to be treated equally under the law, even in a place where the law puts a huge thumb on the scale of tenants and envelopes housing providers in webs of local and state regulations which make it harder and harder to exercise the very rights which are the hallmark and which define what it means to be a property owner in the first place. Our work is dedicated to defending and enforcing those rights for our clients and to fight the erosion of capitalism as the backbone of our free society. Having said that, today, my guest is my very good friend and a valued client, Ari Chazanas, the president of Lotus West Properties, a prominent property management company here in LA, and a landlord himself. Lotus has been managing properties in and around the LA area since around the year 2000, and in 2018, Ari became the president of Haven Co-Living, a development company specializing in the now very popular co-living housing, which has popped up all over LA. Ari is a member of the Forbes Real Estate Council, where he provides valuable real estate data, insights, and research for Forbes readers with monthly contributions to the Forbes editorial team. Ari, thank you so much for joining us, especially here on our inaugural episode. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Niv, and that was a great introduction.
Okay, thank you so much. I figured you might appreciate those sentiments.
Well, also I appreciate what you said about rent control and all the roadblocks that are facing us these days.
Yeah, and I know we definitely want to talk about that. But first, tell us a little bit more about yourself, about Lotus. What do you do? What types of properties do you primarily manage?
So we mostly manage rent control properties in West Los Angeles. We have about 1,000 units under management. Portion of those are owned by myself and family members. And I would say we're more of a boutique agency. And we like to stay geographically focused on, West Los Angeles. From time to time, we'll take properties outside, but it's very rare because in order to provide great property management, you don't want to be spread out too thin.
Right. And as a property manager, just so we can educate the audience, what exactly does that entail?
Well, it's everything from collecting rents, depositing rents, maintaining books and records, bookkeeping, accounting, renting vacancies, dealing with maintenance requests. So it's the whole spectrum of running a property. And we have a team that handles everything, that property supervision, interacts with tenants and with owners. We have a leasing team that is solely dedicated to leasing units. And we have an in-house bookkeeper that handles all the property accounting, and we use a Appfolio for that.
Wow. It's a lot to do.
It is.
So I know it's a very loaded question, but what do you think today is the biggest challenge facing property owners and managers?
That's a good question. Well, I think, like you said, the landscape has changed so much over the last couple of years that one, we're always, seen as the kind of the victimizers, and rather than housing providers. And with legislation that just keeps passing, whether it's cutting our increases in half, or providing legal counsel for free to tenants who abuse the system and ask for jury trials. And so tenants are completely empowered not to pay rent, and that makes it really tough for us when you have this kind of animosity, kind of I don't know where there's this entitlement, I think, that comes from tenants. And there's this movement, especially in Los Angeles. I'm sure you're aware of those groups that are, if it was for them, they would have kept, the COVID moratorium in place for, indefinitely.
Right.
So, that's the biggest issue. And tenants know it. And when the city is giving them these kind of resources and this, quote unquote ammunition, you're like always in a defensive position, and you're always the bad guy, and they're just making it worse. They're just stirring the pot by getting so heavily involved. There's too much intervention by the government. I think there's no other industry that has to deal with this, really. So that's a big issue.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, in a recent filing that we had, a judge wrote and quoted a different judge who he didn't have permission to give his name, so I don't know exactly who said it. But that other judge in a seminar had told this judge that unlawful detainer has now become the most complex area of law in the state of California. So
ridiculous.
Right.
They're just making things more difficult for their, for the court system. They're making it difficult for landlords. It's just being abused. It's not good.
Do you see clients of yours just deciding to dump it, sell their properties in California or LA, and move their capital elsewhere?
Not yet. There's a few here and there that have inquired about selling their properties, that have mentioned it. But the community that I'm a part of, you're a part of as well. I know a lot of those developers are pulling back on any new developments in Los Angeles, and are looking elsewhere. So I do think that it's going to take a year or two for you to fully see the effects of it. But at the end of the day, it's going to result in less housing in the city, and values are obviously going to drop, and they're going to continue to drop. And it's definitely there. I personally haven't seen people offloading 10 apartment buildings and just getting out of the market completely. I haven't seen that, but I know it's there, and I know developers are not, as actively, seeking development opportunities these days.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So why are people still buying apartment buildings in LA?
I don't know. I mean, I think some things are trading. I mean, people at the end of the day, I think LA is very unique in the fact that, we have the great weather and so many benefits to the city. I mean, that's why I never, left Los Angeles. I didn't. A lot of people went to Texas and Florida and, all over the country, Arizona, and bought apartments there. But at the end of the day, I feel like the vacancy rates in those cities can really fluctuate, and you can have 20% vacancy in, a 100-unit complex in Arizona. Meanwhile, in LA, the worst it'll get is 5-6%. But the trade-off is you have all these other, issues that we discussed, related to tenants and abusing the system and this, city council, everything that they're doing to kind of impede us and make our lives harder. So it's a balancing act. So that's probably why there's still some, velocity in the market, is because I would say that LA has all those positive attributes that, somehow offset all of this. But at a certain point, the scales are going to tip, and maybe then it'll really come to a halt in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Yeah.
You see that as being a realistic outcome.
I hope not, but it could be. And, then you throw on top of that the homeless issues. I mean, every day we get 5 tenants calling us, "Can you get the homeless guy out of our parking area? He's defecating here." And I'm like, I say, "No, I can't. That's not my job. Here's a phone number for the Santa Monica police or the LAPD. You call them and let them know, and call your councilman and let them know, because at the end of the day, if we do go there and we get rid of the homeless person, that's just a like a quick fix. They're going to come back. The people who run this city and the police need to be aware of this, and they need to feel the pressure from the community. It shouldn't fall on us. But that's also affecting, I think, the market in Los Angeles. You have some great neighborhoods that are just overrun with homeless people.
Yeah, it's a big problem. What would you say to people who are now looking to buy into the rental market here in SoCal and becoming property owners? Would you still advise them it's a good investment?
I mean, look, if they get a great deal, if they pick up a property for, a 6 cap or something that's just, a very a charmed deal. I don't know how you want to describe it. Yeah, sure, maybe it's worth it. And at the end of the day, there are people who, are gonna who have had a bad experience outside of Los Angeles and have had high vacancy rates in Arizona or wherever it may be, and they'd rather deal with all the negative aspects of Los Angeles in exchange for having some sort of I guess how would I say it? Some consistency and certainty that they're going to have, the occupancy. Which at the end of the day, you can have great occupancy, but if you have tenants that are just abusing the system, I mean, that's another question.
Right.
What's the point?
So, how has increased screening played into your management practice?
Well, we've always been really thorough with our screening, which, it's a full credit report. We do a criminal background check. We call their previous their previous landlord. We call their employer. We verify employment. A lot of management companies, from what I understand, don't do that. And I think some of them who did do that at some point when there was higher vacancy rates, they probably relaxed that a little bit. But that's the most we can do. I mean, there's not much else, we can do besides those 3 kind of key, data sources. I don't know if you've heard of others or you've seen others, but I don't know what else we can do to kind of verify the tenants, not going to, take advantage of us.
Have you ever found during your screening process that people were lying about their previous experience as a tenant or an employee?
No, I've never had that happen. I mean, maybe it snuck by, but that's never happened to me.
Okay. Usually if they give you the information, it's pretty good evidence of the fact that they're being forthright about their past.
Right, exactly. That I've never seen that, but does that happen?
Yeah, sometimes I have heard. I have heard some stories like that.
Okay, got it.
So, yeah, I mean, one thing for everyone to understand who's listening to the podcast, a lot of the question I get is, are you even still allowed to do a criminal background check? Yes, absolutely. You are definitely allowed and encouraged to do criminal background checks. That's a really good way of finding out if the person that you are now interviewing is a safe person to put into your building. As a manager, as an owner, you have an obligation not only to make sure that the owner's finances are being taken care of, but that the other tenants in the building and their guests and your own vendors are being protected from a potentially dangerous person. And
Right.
so I think the criminal background checks are absolutely vital.
Right. Yeah, no, we do them all the time.
Right. Have you ever had to say no to someone because of something you found on a criminal background check?
Yeah, we've said no to some people. I don't know if it was on criminal, but it might have been on credit. Actually, I think once or twice we've seen some questionable credit issues.
Right, exactly. And I just,
criminal issues, yeah.
Yeah, I want people to feel comfortable that you can still say no to people. There are still ways of completely legally and safely saying no to tenants. In my experience, the people who have to call me the least are the ones who screen the most. So I wanted the listeners and I want property managers and owners to feel very, very comfortable that you still are allowed to say no to tenants. You don't have to take every single person who comes in. There are perfectly legal and safe ways to say no to tenants to make sure that you're protecting yourself from potentially bad people, people who maybe don't even know that they're bad people and are trying to get into your building in order to run a racket, in order to misbehave, in order to get some free rent. There really are ways of protecting yourselves from them. And that's definitely things that we're going to talk about as we go on in the show. Ari, a fun little segment that I'm hoping I could do with everybody is, what was your worst tenant story and how did it resolve?
That's a tough question. I've had so many over the years. Sorry, I got my dog on my lap. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
You guys are okay with dogs? My worst tenant. I mean, I had a tenant in a building I owned years ago that started a fire in their unit, and then they made us take we were liable. And then they filed a lawsuit. It was a long time ago. It was 15 years ago, but it was, the whole thing was, we found out after the fact that they were actually, they had done this multiple times to other property owners in the past. I mean, it was, and then insurance company paid them, $500,000. It was crazy. Yeah. I mean, they were con artists, and, we got just completely taken advantage of. The fire department destroyed the whole, half the building, after they went in and to put out the fire. So that was probably my worst experience, I would say.
Did insurance cover the damage?
Partial, not all of it.
Really?
It was a fight with the insurance company.
No kidding. Wow.
It was rough.
So the only person who won was the tenant.
Yeah, exactly.
And did he set the fire on purpose?
That's what they believe, yeah.
Wow. But I assume there was never enough evidence to prosecute him for arson.
No.
Wow.
That's what happened to us.
Wow. Where was that?
On a street called Curson in West Hollywood area.
Wow. Yeah, it's another really important point is make sure your insurance is there and it's tight. Insurance is very, very important.
Yeah, and then you have to bring in an attorney to, that handles insurance coverage to kind of force them to cover it. It got very expensive and it got out of control.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say is the most important thing for young people who are maybe looking to break into the property management business?
Don't do it.
Right. Does not encourage.
Yeah, I swear. I mean, that's like the best answer I can give.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. But look, if you're managing the properties that you own, I think that's fine. But
Right.
I wouldn't recommend third party for somebody getting into real estate. But
Right. Now, you have to hire property managers sometimes. I noticed that there are private property management certification programs out there. Do you ever factor that into your hiring? Are you impressed when they have their certification in property management?
it's not yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, AGLA, AOA, they all have their kind of continuing education. I think property management is not a. It's a difficult business, but it's not a complicated business. And at the end of the day, you don't need a whole lot of training to do a good job. You just need to be somebody who's, I would say, thorough, follows through, organized, and professional when you're speaking to tenants, because like you said, they're super sensitive and they jump on anything. So you have to really like kind of tiptoe around them and have a friendly demeanor, I would say.
Yeah.
Outwardly friendly demeanor. And that's it. I mean, I would say, doesn't make a difference to me if the person has that training or not.
Right.
I've had employees that have had it and have employees who haven't. And it's not it doesn't play into, any decisions that I make as far as hiring people.
Right. I find a lot of the times when owners who self-manage call me, or even an owner who is with a property manager, and they call me and I explain to them what the challenges are of getting rid of tenants, dealing with tenants, responding to their complaints, evicting, etc. They're frequently just surprised and dumbfounded that any system like this actually exists. What are your experiences with trying to explain to owners what the battlefield actually looks like?
Battlefield in terms of self-managing?
No, the battlefield in terms of how difficult it is to deal with tenants, how difficult the courts make it, how pro-tenant the judges are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, how difficult it is? It's very difficult. I mean, I for the last 3 years, I didn't feel like this before, but I just feel like completely beaten down and defeated, and it's not fun anymore. I mean, it was never fun, but it's such a negative kind of, the whole thing is just not I don't know how to explain it. For me, it's just getting through the day, and addressing the issues, and just, trying to stay positive, but it's painful, I would say, right now these days, to be, an owner and a property manager in Los Angeles.
Do you feel like you have to sort of preempt the owner when they first sign with you and explain to them, say, hey, look, as we go into this, please understand these are the challenges that we face nowadays, just so you're not surprised later?
Yeah, I do that a lot. I'll say, hey, if we're going to have an eviction, then, I just need you to know that, we're likely going to have to make a deal. Tenants have a lot of leverage. It's not worth fighting it. So I've taken that kind of position, where in the past, I would say I was more gung-ho and a little bit more assertive, but now it's, you can't do that.
Right. It's completely a numbers game. It's cheaper to pay the tenant to leave and get a very certain result than it is to pay me to go out and fight with them to get a maybe result.
Right.
It might be more painful, but it makes a lot more sense to just pay the guy to go.
Right. Exactly.
Right. You find that owners are sometimes, it's difficult to convince them of that, even though it's so logical?
No, I think owners are, there's enough information and enough, bad news coming out every day or every week, that, they're aware of it. Like, how can you not be? I mean, before we got on this call, I asked you that question about rent control and the 2.2%. That's an owner that we manage for that lives in England, and they keep track of like what's going on in Los Angeles, and they're constantly asking me questions. So, they're there. They know the landscape has changed. They know that, things are not, the same as what they used to be. So, yeah.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about Haven. What exactly does Haven do?
So Haven we started it about a year before COVID. It's a co-living model that's based kind of on a Japanese style pod, which are basically enclosed bunk beds. And we opened 2 locations in Venice, and COVID hit, and it kind of put a stop to our growth trajectory. We have about 180 beds in Venice.
Wow.
And we just bought a building on Hillgard on Sorority Row across the street from UCLA. And we're going to do the same thing there. Hopefully we'll have some. Yeah. And it's 30-day rentals because of, the new LA. So we can't do anything less than 30 days. And we charge about $1,000 a month for your own private pod, which is, to have that rental amount in Venice, let alone across the street from UCLA on Hillgard, $1,000 a month is just, you can't get into the market for half that. So double that. So we think we're providing a pretty good service here.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And it seems like it's been very, very popular, especially with young people, right?
Yeah. It was initially, we had a lot of momentum. We had, wait lists of people that wanted to get in. We had very intricate application process that was almost, akin to like applying to college. So it was a lot of demand for it.
Wow.
I'd say the last couple of years since COVID, we had to kind of, lessen our standards and, pick up from that, having 50% occupancy, going from 100% to 50% during COVID. And that was because we just let people out of their contracts. We wanted to decrease the density, because obviously our places are fairly dense. So it's been a little bit of like an uphill battle to get back to where we were, but we're working on it.
Wow. Okay. So what is it that you think makes co-living so popular with people nowadays? Aside from the reduced rent.
Yeah. Well, I think that, and initially when we first opened, we had a lot of people that were moving in, that were, relocating from another city, had gotten a job here. We had some people who were, had Google jobs, Tesla jobs, worked at Meta, who were making, 6+ figures a year, but they wanted to live in a community, kind of get to know people in a new city, and then kind of feel out what part of the city they wanted to eventually settle in. So it's kind of like a, kind of a midway kind of stopping point for them to kind of make some friends, figure out what part of the city was right for them. So I think that was a lot of it, was community and kind of getting to know the city for a lot of members. And then, yeah, of course, paying $1,000 a month is it's a fairly good deal.
Yeah, and you were telling me, I think I read that the LA Times did a nice story about the Haven facility you all have in Venice, and about how they all kind of work together as a community. They kind of make their own social contracts, their own social rules, and they just kind of did that organically, right?
Yeah, it was very organic in the beginning, and we had a great coverage in the press, and now what you need, and we're gonna hire somebody soon, is kind of an activities community director that can set up trips to the beach, trips to Yosemite. There's like this whole community, like fostering of community, that we really like to embrace there. But that's something that we're working on. Again, we have to hire somebody. And yoga classes, meditation classes, we used to have a very full schedule, so that's part of the offerings.
Wow.
Yeah.
And those kind of things are maybe amenities that you can offer even in a not co-living situation, which can attract some of those young professionals, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it takes a dedicated employee to manage all that. But yeah, if you have a big enough project and a big enough building, you have common areas, I think it's smart to spend a little money to do that. I think young people, appreciate that.
Right. And right. Okay. Well, Ari, thank you so much. That's pretty much all of our time for today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your insights and your tips and history. I hope our audience appreciated and enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much for everybody for tuning into this first episode of Landlords and Tenants. I hope you had as much fun as we did, and I hope you can tune in to our next episode coming soon. If you had any questions about landlord tenant or real estate or construction matters or just regular business legal issues, please feel free to reach out to us. The number is 818-661-2420, or you can email me at niv@davidovichlaw.com. That should say niv@davidovichlaw.com. Thanks so much, everybody. See you again soon.
But I think the most touching question is, why did the war stop?
You've been tuning into Landlords and Tenants with your host, Niv Davidovich. You can find the show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, davidovichlaw.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.